Good evening and welcome to tonight's Venture Lab event, The Hunt for Scarce Talent, subtitle How Startups Can Beat Big Players and Compete for Top Talent in a Tight Labor Market. Just to add a little perspective from my own experience, I was very much part of the hot labor market back in the late 90s, and the feeling I get of what's going on around here is very similar to the superheated atmosphere that we had back then. So I think this is a topical issue. My name's Dave Watts. I'm chair of the MIT Venture Lab. And I should mention that all of our programs are recorded and may be accessed from our website, mitwa.org. And some of them will probably end up on the larger MIT website through the portal, maybe all of them, I don't know. So you'll have the opportunity to view these again and view other programs we've had in the past and hopefully suggest to others that they take a look at them. There's no charge, and they generally take a little time to get posted because we do some editing, but rest assured it will be up there. First, a word about who we are. The MIT Enterprise Forum is a global organization of entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. It was founded in 1978. The MIT Enterprise Forum produces programs, events, and other things about, books, journals, about innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, and related activities for a community of 50,000 thought leaders through a network of 28 chapters worldwide. The Seattle chapter is among the largest outside of Cambridge, and there are a number of MIT alumni who are active in the chapter and on the board. But it's very welcoming to anybody who's interested in the topic of technology or topics of entrepreneurship and technology. The Venture Lab itself is a program of the Enterprise Forum, which is one of those 28 chapters, as I mentioned. And we have volunteers and sponsors drawn from a broad spectrum within the community. We're a forum for those who share a common set of values, as I mentioned, around technology and entrepreneurship. But our focus is more on the nuts and bolts of how things get done in a business that is trying to get started and perhaps one that is growing rapidly and trying to manage that growth. So we bring in entrepreneurs who've been there and done that. We bring in service providers who've been there and done that. We bring in practitioners, and we give them a chance to share with you the value of their experience and let you ask questions. I always ask this question before the presentation begins, and that is, how many people are here tonight for the first time? A few? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how many of you are entrepreneurs? Great. And anybody thinking about becoming an entrepreneur? Well, that takes care of the rest of the audience. Okay. Okay, and in terms of coming events, I would like to make you aware of a couple of things that are coming along pretty rapidly. One is a dinner event on March 19th at the nearby Washington State Convention Center entitled The Augmented Self on Wearable Technology. That's one of our dinner programs, and that touches more on the technology side of the Enterprise Forum. Second is our next Venture Lab on April 3rd, which is one that's become a very popular annual event, a must-attend event, I would say, for those who are seeking funding and those who are providing funding, called Meet the Angels. And Rebecca Lavelle will probably be moderating that. Certainly will be involved in helping us organize it. It's always very popular. More information about these events, again, can be found on the mitwa.org website. Also like to mention a quick word on behalf of our sponsors. We would like to thank you because without you, none of this would be possible. I would especially like to thank the VLab season sponsor, FLH Law Firm, and Equinix. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Is there anybody here from Equinix? They can correct me if I'm wrong. Well, so it must be right. My understanding is that they provide globally interconnected data centers, and it's a real powerhouse if you're trying to start a business and have a global presence and need that kind of infrastructure. Jamie Wiegand, who's a partner at FLH, is here tonight. I'd like to point that out. Jamie is also a very active member of the Venture Lab team and has helped us immeasurably in a number of ways. So thank you for direct participation. And our format tonight is going to be very informal. Brian Myers, who's sitting up here in the front row, is the VLab team member and idea man and driver for tonight's event who helped put this together. He's going to introduce our participants and describe the format and may kick things off with a question or two. I will, I think, turn it over to you, Brian, and let you take it from there. Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight, as you know, we're going to talk about the hunt for talent, and so appropriately we pulled in a couple of folks who have been in the trenches for a great long time working on just this problem. On the far side is Thomas Abrams, who's the head of recruiting for ArenaNet. And for those of you who don't know ArenaNet, it is a game maker, software company here on the east side. And they make the fabulously successful game called Guild Wars. So at any given moment, there's probably 100,000 people all immersed in a 3D virtual world, and all of that is getting served from Bellevue in the Factoria area. They are successful enough that they've had to recruit a lot of people in a fairly short period of time. And Thomas has led that charge. They've hired about 170 people over the past 12 months. Which is quite an effort. So he has a certain perspective from doing all of that. Nearer to me is Jack Goldberg. He's the president of Personnel Management Systems, which is an outsourced HR provider. He was careful to tell me that that's not a recruiter. What he does, his company does, they're very large, and they come in and they provide a sort of outsourced HR services for those companies that aren't large enough to be able to staff it internally. So perfect for startups. So we have two slightly different perspectives on the process of finding, recruiting, and building talent inside your company. So at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Jack and let you take away and give us the 10,000-foot overview.
Thank you. Is the mic okay? Can you hear me back there? Great. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. So obviously we have a small group, so we can do this informally. I'm going to yak at you here for 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to Thomas, and we'll have plenty of time for questions. So as I'm speaking, if you have questions, go ahead and write them down, and we'll have plenty of time to catch them all at the end. So again, I am a human resource guy, so I'm oftentimes the barrier between people looking for work and the jobs, right? So I think it's important to kind of understand the perspective of human resources. What I want to do first is give you I think a little perspective, maybe a different way to think about filling jobs within your organization. There's 3 pieces to it, and conceptually, I'd like you to think about this conversation we're going to have tonight in these 3 different pieces. There's the recruitment piece, there's the screening piece, and then there's the hiring piece. So when we talk about let's go find or hunt for scarce talent, there are really 3 pieces to that process. Again, recruiting, screening, and hiring. So if I can get you just to kind of fully embrace and think about that idea, if I can do that tonight, then I think I've accomplished my mission. So let's look at what it means. If we say we're going to go out and hunt for scarce talent, for me that kind of conjures up the image of maybe the caveman with a spear. We're going to go hunting and we're going to capture something or kill something in that case. Now, the other image that's maybe more modern would be the big game hunter with the rifle, or perhaps the fisherman with a fishing pole that were out hunting for something or fishing for something. The reason I'm giving you those analogies is that's not really what happens when we go looking for people, right? It's not about shooting the big animal or catching the big fish. What it's really about is the process that goes into, in this case, the hunt or the fishing. And if you think about this, those of you who are hunters or fishermen, yes, part of the activity is going out with the rifle and shooting something or putting the hook in the water and catching something. But really, if you think about the experience, the quality of the animal that you hunt or the animal that you, or the fish that you fish for, has a whole lot to do with the preparation that goes into that process, right? How did we prepare for our hunting trip or prepare for our fishing trip? Very, very important, and will have a significant impact on the quality of our hunting adventure or the quality of our fishing adventure. And the same thing happens after we actually hunt the animal, shoot the animal, or catch the fish. What happens afterward? Very important when you think about the whole experience of hunting or fishing. So you see my point? It's not just about hunting or fishing, it's about the process, what happens before or what happens after. That's going to impact the quality very much. And the reason I'm telling you about that is it doesn't work if you're just going to go out and hunt for a new employee. You might luckily perhaps find someone, but the chances of that person actually being a good fit for your organization is purely going to be by luck. We're much better off if we put a little effort in before that process so that we can actually increase our chances of being successful. So what does that mean? If I walked up to somebody here who's an entrepreneur ready to start a business, and I was your rich uncle, and I said, here's $200,000. I want you to go spend this money on a marketing and advertising campaign for your new product or service. Well, you'd think that was pretty cool, right? Well, my guess is you wouldn't just call Metro and buy a bunch of bus ads and blow up your $200,000, right? Nobody, I think, is going to go do that. Instead, you're going to say, I've got $200,000. I've got a product or service. I need to think about this a little bit. I need to put together a marketing or advertising program. Maybe I need to do some market research. Maybe I need to do some value analysis in the marketplace. Maybe I need to understand my demographics. Maybe I need to hire a consultant to help me with packaging and display and all the things that go into putting together a good marketing and advertising program. You're not just going to go out and buy a bunch of bus ads, right? Again, that's the way I want you to think about the hiring process. And my $200,000 number is actually a real number, because when you think about hiring even a mid-level to senior level manager, when you think about pay and benefits and all the things that come along with the expenses of hiring someone, it's easy to spend $200,000. So when you think about hiring someone, I want you to think about a $200,000 expense that you want to spend wisely. Okay, so let's talk about the first piece. Remember, the recruitment piece. Recruitment is us preparing to generate applicant flow. If you're going to fill open positions, you have to generate quality applicant flow. All right? Now, HR people have tools, right? We have tools to help us prepare and generate applicant flow. The standard tool that we often use is called a job description. Now, you can call it whatever you want, I don't care, but somewhere on a piece of paper, I really want you to think about, what is it I'm trying to accomplish, right? What's the skills, experience? Is this one okay? All right. What are the skills, experience, qualifications, education, licenses, degrees required for this particular position? How does this particular position fit in, accomplish the goals of the organization that I'm trying to create? Now, that process is going to take a little bit of work, right? You're not going to do that on the back of an envelope sitting at Starbucks. It's going to require maybe discussion with your board of directors or your advisory group or your the people that may be funding your company, your senior management team. You're going to really put some serious thought into what is this person going to do? What are they going to accomplish for me? And how does that fit into my organizational goals? So that is what we often call a job description. Again, I don't care what you call it, but you need to go through that first step. We also want to think about some of the logistical issues, like where's the person going to work? What about commute? What if I have to pay moving expenses? What's the compensation that I'm willing to pay for this position? What are the benefits associated with this position? All of those things need to be thought about before we actually start generating that applicant flow. It makes no sense to start advertising, generating an applicant flow if you haven't gone through the first planning steps. Okay, so far so good? Once we have that, we can then, like the hunter or the fisherman, we can go hunting and fishing. Okay, we've done some of our planning work. To generate applicant flow, of course, again, we have lots of tools, right? We can advertise, right? You can go to obviously various job sites, bulletin boards. Thomas will talk more about that later, but we want to advertise this position. Some companies stop right there, and I think that's probably a shame because I think you're missing some potential applicant flow, and there's other things you can do to increase that applicant flow. So social media, whether it's your Facebook or your LinkedIn site, advertise using social media. Friends and family. Too often we forget that friends and family can be a great source of applicants. So what I'm talking about there is getting the word out that you are actually trying to hire somebody, you have a job opening. And I think people who are entrepreneurs do have a broad network of friends, family, associates, partners, etc. Get the word out. Don't just rely on advertising. Let people know that you have a job opening. Trusted advisors. I think everyone in this room probably has a set of trusted advisors, whether it's accountants, attorneys, consultants, etc. Get the word out to them that you have an opening. Let them help you fill that position. Oftentimes, people like to help, right? They have people they know that are looking for work. They like to help you, so it's perfectly fine to ask them for leads and referrals. Networking groups like this, great source of candidates for a position. Utilize networking groups like this. Again, a great way to fill up and increase applicant flow. Thomas will talk a little bit about agencies and the role of agencies in terms of increasing applicant flow, but certainly that's an option for you. The way I want you to think about it is you have a job opening at your organization. You have to sell your organization to the people that are looking for work. Now, sometimes the people looking for work aren't really looking for work, right? Maybe they're working somewhere else, and they're just maybe kind of interested in what you're doing. I want you to think about yourself, your organization, selling yourself, your organization, to the job market. If you think about it like that, more like my advertising and marketing example, then I think you're going to be more successful in terms of generating quality applicant flow, right? It's a little bit different than what a lot of employers think. They think that somehow if they throw a job opening out there that people will really want to come to work for them. Probably not, right? Unless you're a brand name company in town, people aren't going to come flocking to your doorstep looking for a job. You need to market yourself. You need to sell yourself. The analogy that I think about sometimes is you can spend a lot of money on maybe you have a retail store and you're trying to get customers in the door. And you spend a whole lot of money on advertising and marketing to generate customers, right? Applicant flow into your store. And then when they show up in the store, there's nobody there to wait on them or answer their questions, or there's no product on the shelf. So basically, you've spent all that time with the advertising and marketing, but then when they actually come into the store, nothing happens. I would hate for you to be thinking about filling jobs the same way, right? Spending all the money on advertising and marketing, generating an applicant flow, and then nothing happens when the person applies. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. There's a lot of creativity that I think can be utilized when we think about how to generate applicant flow. I think companies that are successful generating interest in the job market, interest of people who want to work for you, they use creative ways, right? And so sometimes we have to get help from creative people to help us. If you're a creative person, then I think you can probably maybe come up with your own ways to generate applicant flow. But if you're not a creative person, then turn to your marketing people, your creative people, and ask them for help. And what I mean by that is, let's just say you're doing something like just writing an ad, right? Maybe you're gonna post an ad on Craigslist, right? Well, if you're not a particularly good writer or not very creative, you probably should not be the one writing that ad. Turn to your creative people, have them write the ad, have them use the words that describe your company as someplace exciting to work, right? Makes sense? Again, if you were out there trying to advertise your products in the marketplace, you would want somebody creative doing that. I want you to do the same thing when you're trying to generate applicant flow. Be creative in every aspect. Think about things like, I don't know, I know companies who will take their business card and on the back of their business card have a job applicant hotline, right? So that if you're out and about and you see somebody that might be a good candidate, I say, Keith, I enjoyed talking to you. Here's my card. We have some job openings. Why don't you give me a call, right? You're constantly kind of out there recruiting, and when you interact with people that you think might be a good fit for your organization, you encourage them to call you, right? That's a great way to generate applicant flow. Other things, we've got clients that have games. They'll play games to try and generate applicant flow. So maybe they go out to their existing employees or, again, associates and friends and encourage them to enter the contest, and enter the contest by submitting a friend's job application, right? Just cute ways to generate interest in maybe the openings that you have. Signage, some companies, some organizations can get a lot of value out of just old-fashioned signs at the register, signs in the windows, signs at the door. Again, that doesn't work for everyone, but it's thinking through that hiring process and thinking of creative ways to generate applicant flow. I'm guessing if we had time and I had a chalkboard here, we could probably come up with 20 or 30 very creative ways to generate applicant flow. So that's what I'm talking about. I also want you to think about what is the applicant's experience when they actually apply for a job, right? So a minute ago I said it's a shame to spend all the money generating an applicant flow and then have nothing happen when a person actually applies for a job. So what I want you to think about is, what is the applicant's experience when they apply for a job? So what I mean by that, and those of you who have ever looked for a job, you know what this feels like, right? You submit your application, nothing happens. No call, no contact, not a good experience, and perhaps even hurts the reputation of that company. So when you're in the hiring seat, I want you to think about the applicant's experience, right? So if the applicant submits a resume, do they get a response of some kind? If they call a telephone number, do they actually talk to somebody? Is there some place they can ask questions? Is there a place they can go and get a copy of the job description? Is there a place they can go if they just want to get more information about the company? Have you made it easy for the person to apply for a job? Again, use the customer analogy. Is it easy for the customer to spend money in your store? Is it easy for the applicant to apply for a job? That's the mindset I want you to have. All right, next section, screening, right? So now we have good applicant flow, maybe too much applicant flow, and now we need to screen. How are we going to figure out, we have a nice stack of resumes, how are we going to find the ones that we want to actually talk to? Again, HR people have a number of tools. There's no secret sauce here. Somebody was asking me about, hopefully they can get the secret sauce today. There's no secret sauce. Screening applicants is a lot of work. We have tools that we can use. Again, you know most of these already. The old-fashioned employment application is still a great tool, whether it's somebody fills out online or is asked to submit in some other way. Applications can be a great tool because what it does is it allows you to put all the information about the applicants in the same format. So if you're the CEO and you have to screen 200 applicants, it's a lot easier screening employment applications than it is a whole bunch of unique resumes, right? Because it's hard to find the information. So asking an applicant to fill out an application, it's a little bit old-fashioned, but it is a great way to help you more efficiently screen. Questionnaires, we have clients that use just, just a good old-fashioned questionnaire where you submit an application to me, and what you get back from me first, before I even talk to you, is a questionnaire. And the questions are things that I want you to respond to that obviously are appropriate for the job. So it's kind of the pre-telephone interview questionnaire, if you will. And it's not perfect, but you'll get maybe a sample of the person's writing skills. You'll get kind of a sample and idea of their thought processes. And of course, hopefully you'll get valuable information about their qualifications. So questionnaires are great screening tools. Telephone interviews, of course, if you're applying for a job, that's very normal now to have a telephone interview. And if you're screening applications, I think telephone interviews are a great way to kind of quickly screen out the people that aren't qualified for the position. Of course, in-person interviews, still widely used. Group interviews, most of our clients now do group interviews. Group interviews can be a good tool, a good way for multiple people in the organization to meet an applicant in an efficient way. In every case, whether it's telephone interviews, in-person one-on-one interviews, or group interviews, they need to be structured. We call them structured interviews or behavioral interviews. No by the gut interviewing, no winging it. That typically doesn't work well. So we should have our questions well thought out ahead of time, and you're basically asking all the applicants the same questions. We do personality tests. Those are used by companies still. That can be a good screening tool. Skills testing can also obviously be a good tool. But again, it's having a screening process in place that you replicate consistently for each applicant. Sometimes I don't care so much about actually what you do. It's more that you're doing something, and the something is well thought out, and again, delivered across all the applicants. Other things, of course, that we use for screening, background checks, reference checks, credit checks, drug testing, criminal background checks. Again, those all have to be applied as appropriate for the particular position, but they're all still great screening tools. Okay, third piece, I'll wrap it up here. The hiring piece, right? The hiring piece is kind of the next stage. The hiring piece is a piece that is incredibly important and often overlooked. So what I mean by this is we've spent all the time and effort on recruitment. We've generated the applicant flow. Then we spend all this time and effort on the screening process. We've come up with our good candidate, and then we blow it, right? We blow the job offer piece, right? All of a sudden, we want to, what's your first name? We want to hire Kathy. She's all excited about it. I'm all excited about it. And now I have to offer her a job. And for some reason, I forgot to think that through, right? You can't wing that stuff, right? A well-organized hiring process means I've already thought through what's my job offer going to look like, what's the benefit and compensation that I'm willing to pay for that position, how am I going to handle moving expenses if that's an issue, what about the non-compete, confidentiality agreements, do we have an employment contract, no employment contract? All that needs to be thought through, otherwise, you could have 3 good job offers, right? And I'm the one that looks like I'm disorganized, not very professional. Well, that does not reflect well on me as an organization. So I want thought put into what that job offer experience is going to look like. And again, think about selling. I'm still selling my organization to you, and this is the kind of the moment where you're going to say, yes, I'm going to buy from you, Jack. I'm going to come to work for you, or not. You don't want to treat that too casually. And the next step that I think organizations kind of overlook is what we call the new employee orientation or the onboarding experience. Now, this actually kind of happens after you've accepted the job, of course, but you know what? We're still kind of in that honeymoon period, right? You've accepted the job, but it's your first day. And as an HR person, I want to make your first day or your first week or your first few months a good experience, right? So that means I've thought it through, right? I have a place for you to sit. I have equipment. I have people to greet you. I have people to take you on a tour. I have people to sit down with you and review the handbook and the benefits and create the personnel file. I have somebody to show you where the restroom is. I have someone that's going to sit down with you and talk about the mission and the organization and the organizational structure of the company. You're going to have a real, and I don't care if you have 2 employees or 200 employees, you're going to have a real new hire, new employee onboarding experience. I'm not going to wing it because I put all this effort into it again, and if you don't have a good first week or second week experience, your opinion of my organization goes down pretty quickly, and there are other job offers out there that you could decide my company's not a good place for you to go, and you would jump ship. And again, after all that effort, we don't want that to happen. So we want to see that onboarding experience be a good one. The last thing I'm going to just mention very briefly is some organizations have employee turnover. They have a difficult time retaining good employees. And sometimes organizations spend too much time on the hiring side, right, trying to fill job openings, and not enough time on the retention side. And good HR people go in and say, you know what, we're burning up a lot of effort on the hiring side, when if we could stop the bleeding on the backside, the employee turnover on the backside, we actually kind of solve the hiring problem, right? So if you're working with an organization or your organization is losing people, then you're making your hiring part that much more difficult. So food for thought. Hopefully that gave you some perspective on the 3 parts of hunting for great talent. Thomas is going to talk a little bit about the role of a recruiter, both internal and third party or agencies, and how to use them to help you fill openings. Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks, Jack. So my name's Thomas Abrams. I head up the recruiting function for ArenaNet, which is a gaming company. And I've been in the recruiting field for a little over 14 years now. My background varies from agency side, meaning staffing agencies, to internal at corporations, and now at a gaming company. What I'm going to talk to you guys about is more so my experiences, fee structures, when to use agencies, when to hire an internal recruiter, and then we'll go into a little bit about some questions and answers. We'll do some Q&A, but so internal recruiters. I would be considered an internal recruiter. I have one coordinator that works with me who does all the scheduling of interviews and debriefs and even sometimes offers, right? So internal recruiters are good when you're in a situation to where you actually have somewhat time, right? I look at everyone here and you're looking at starting up a company. What is your time frame of getting people hired, right? If you have a short time frame to get someone hired, it might not be the right time to hire an internal recruiter. You could hire a coordinator that could then engage external recruiters, agencies, but again, agencies have fees, right? They make their money. They're free to utilize until I actually fill a position. And then there's the other side of using external recruiters, of you don't have that much time. You need to ramp up, and you need to be able to utilize their database, and they might have like 10 recruiters supporting you at that one time. So there are different types of going internal versus external. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the pros of having an internal recruiter. So I look at recruiting as I'm the first person to talk to a candidate. So I'm kind of like the face of the company in the sense of, if I rub you the wrong way on my first interview or screen or anything, just touching base with you, then that's how they get the company, like the impression of the company. It's they didn't have a good talk with the recruiter. I don't really like that company. It's that split second to where you could hire the wrong recruiter, which then is the face of your company, right? So it's very crucial when you interview for recruiters, or whether it's mid-level or senior level, that you get a sense of their personality. Do they fit the culture that you're going to try to create within your company, right? The cost with hiring an internal recruiter, well, you got their base salary. But then you also need to get all the advertising and LinkedIn Recruiter. I don't know, how many people here are on LinkedIn? Pretty much. How many of you guys know what LinkedIn Recruiter is? Some, right? Costs about, for one license is about maybe around $9,000 to $10,000 a year to have this LinkedIn Recruiter. But what it does is it gives you access to everyone within LinkedIn. So you actually don't have to be someone's friend or the third, second or third friend of theirs in order to talk with them. And so you probably don't know, but you guys are recruiters right now. So, it is a lot of networking, it's a lot of reaching out, it's a lot of approach. But going back to the internal piece, is you have to afford that. Then you have, we talked about, or Jack talked about having some kind of system to track these people. You can, if you have the money, to purchase like an applicant tracking system. This goes back to what Jack was talking about, candidate experience, right? What kind of experience does a candidate have if they don't have all the same experiences of going through a system, having to apply for the job? How long did it take to apply for that job? And what kind of questions are you answering to weed out these candidates? Are they following these type of processes? A lot of companies have these, and they're not expensive. Some are, some aren't. Like, we have Taleo. Taleo is very expensive. It's an enterprise type of system. But then there's smaller ones that are out there that do the same type of job. They're basically used as a database so that you can track candidates that are qualified for the job and put notes in the system so that they all have the same experience. Now, we go back to being an internal recruiter. I, myself, just like getting feedback, or if the candidate is not qualified for the job, what kind of experience do they get? Do they just go off, and a lot of companies do this, to where they just don't reply to them at all. So you have these applicants that are like, I applied to this company, I don't really like them, I never heard back from them. It's not, we send out rejection letters, but we also, there's a timing piece of the rejection letter, right? If they don't fit a certain type of category, they're not qualified for the job. No one likes to receive a rejection letter right after you apply. That's not a good experience, right? And how do you write this rejection letter? And that's not a good, I don't like that word, but it is what it is. And how do you write that? How does there, to have a soft blow of like, please apply for another job again, or we have other qualified candidates, right? I like to say, don't reinvent the wheel. Everything's online these days. You can do a ton of research on different templates and then find out what fits your company, It goes the same way with job descriptions. If you're not a good writer of job descriptions, there are a ton of job descriptions online these days that you can go and you can look and see, all right, this actually fits what I'm looking for, right? You don't have to necessarily hire someone to write that for you. Recruiters these days, they build all these templates so they can reuse them for upcoming jobs. Another thing for internal recruiters is that you're going to have to, depending on how many hires that you have to make that year, you might have to have a coordinator that gets hired with this internal recruiter. We filled, at my company, over 170 positions last year, but we weren't a startup. I'm fortunate to have a good name in the gaming industry, right? There's a difference. Our pipeline gets flowed because we did the right advertising. We had the money to back that. But we also have a good brand behind us. So what do you do if you don't have that? and I don't know what that was. So what do you do if you don't have that? If you're just starting up and you're competing against the Googles and the Amazons, you know? You have to, like Jack said, you have to have all these thoughts and all these things in place before you start searching for talent. Because you got to have some kind of pool in order to make these candidates interested in what you have to offer. Another thing with internal candidates is that, you know, again, you're talking about someone that's going to know your culture. When you use external agencies, they're great, and I use them from time to time, but they might not necessarily, you're not the only position that they're working on or the only client that they're working on as well. So you don't have that luxury of having that internal recruiter working on your orders, knowing that this internal recruiter has, you know, understands your culture and understands the hiring manager's needs. Because after a while, working with hiring managers in my company, I know everyone's needs. At least I hope I do. But it's very, very, very critical that you understand this, because this will then weed out the pieces of not having to have a long interview process or supplying the wrong candidates. And I always say this, sometimes, you know, you look at the cost of what it is to hire a candidate, and you look at the cost of what it is to take the time of a hiring manager. You know, we look at this and go, am I wasting this hiring manager's time with this resume? Well, a lot of agencies sometimes do, because they don't really know our culture. They don't really know what exactly that they're looking for. So sometimes it is better to have an internal recruiter. It all depends on timing. Now, going to external recruiters will charge fees for, there's 3 different types. You can do contract, which is just if you need them for a project, only for about 3 to 6 months, you hire a contractor, they bill you a certain rate, an hourly rate. Now, we have stuff in place that goes to a 45% markup. Others will ask for just bill rates. My suggestion would be to be able to control that and figure out, okay, well, I really want this 45% markup, because then I know that you're actually finding a candidate that is getting paid X amount, that maybe in the end, if we like this candidate, we can do contract to hire. So there's contract to hire, and we have things in place that actually have, after 6 months of this person being on contract, I'm allowed to bring this person on for free. And then we have the scale. If you bring that person on before that 6 months, it's a prorated type of percentage. From 20%, we have it from 20% on down, right? So if they've been so many months, it goes down further. And then there's the other type where you hire, and I used to work in Australia for about 5 months, and we were supporting startup companies. And they would hire my agency to purely fill direct hire needs. We need to staff up 10 people in these spots, and I need them within 2 weeks. What do you do? So they hire an agency. Now, the kicker is you're talking about a 20% fee of a base salary. So if you're looking for someone that's $100,000, you just spent $20,000 to fill that position. Now, there are guarantees in certain agreements that where you can put in like a 90-day guarantee if that person didn't work out within 90 days, because you never know what's going to happen with the candidate. I call it speed dating, right? Interviewing is truly speed dating. You get to know someone for, 2 rounds of interviews, maybe 2 days, and then you're taking that chance, right? It's speed dating. And then when they get on board, you get to know, are they really good? There are fees in place to where they have like a backfill. They'll backfill after, if a person works past 90 days, then, we don't ask, we're assuming that person's good. And that goes into the point of Jack saying you're onboarding, right? If you put someone into a role and then you just let them go and you're not having a good onboarding plan, and you find out 4 months into it that this person's not doing that great for you and it's not a fit, well, it's too late, because you just let that person go, right? So we do have things in place into our agreements that say before 90 days, the agency will have to replace that person. So if we let that person go, the agency still keeps the fee, but they're now on the hook to replace that person. So we go through the interview process all over again. Another thing with agencies is that we have the exclusive and non-exclusive. As an internal recruiter, if I call it out to an agency, I truly try to give an exclusive to one agency first for about, and this is just my practice, for about maybe 1 to 2 weeks. The only reason why is because the talent pool is so small. And a lot of people call it out to multiple agencies. Then you have multiple agencies, and remember, these agencies are now the face of your company. So you have multiple agencies representing your company contacting the same candidates sometimes, right? So that alone can drive your name down, only because you have all these agencies. Now, agencies work for free. Again, they work for free until they fill the position, right? And the mindset for a lot of managers is like, let's just call it out, and I'll have all these agencies work for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good. So I tend to give an agency about 1 to 2 weeks with an exclusive, and then I might have 2 others that will support after the fact. And that's only because if I have enough time, right? If you don't, then you might give it out to 3, but then you also might say, all right, here's the specific rules to if you contact a candidate. Now you tell these agencies, I expect you to ask if they've ever applied for our company before. Right then and there, they'll say, oh yeah, another agency actually contacted me and I'm being represented by them. Therefore, you don't have cross submittals. So those are a little bit of the differences between using agency and internal. Again, if you were hiring an internal recruiter, that recruiter might run, depending if you're like mid-level, 50K, all the way up to senior level, you could go up a little bit past 100K for these recruiters. But if you think about, if you have an internal recruiter that filled 5 positions, the recruiter pays for themselves if you're paying 20% fees to direct hires, right? But then again, these other agencies have other talent pools, they have different databases, but again, it's all about your business needs and how quickly you need to ramp up and how trustworthy you are with these other agencies to represent your company. Because again, they're the face of your company. The recruiter is, and the recruiting agencies are. And I was going to dive in a little bit about interview. So that's internal and external. Now, I'm going to dive in a little bit about my process as an internal recruiter. And this goes with figuring out, thinking about my managers and thinking about all the people that are, and I call them interview loops. They're all the people that are tied into the interviews when we bring someone on site. And even when we don't bring someone on site, when we're having phone screens. So in our process, we have, I screen the candidates first. And this is more so about culture fit. This is more about salary. And I'm very adamant, and not everyone does this, but I do, to talk about salary up front. So I call it's closing up front. So that when you're making an offer, there's really we already talked about this up front. We already talked about what you're looking for. I'm going to try to get you what you're looking for. We're not negotiating at the end, right? So, but that's my process. Other recruiters do it differently. I found it to be successful in the sense that sometimes you're really off the mark. Sometimes I have a position and it's for $80,000. This is what my budget is, $80,000. And I have a candidate on the phone that's coming from Microsoft that makes $130,000. If you're not talking about salary up front and you're talking at the end, how much time did you waste for everyone involved in the interview loop to get to the tail end and go, we're not even in the same? Because other companies pay different. Doesn't mean that the candidate's not worth that money. It just means that you're not paying that within your budget. And so that's my process, and it doesn't have to be everyone's, but I find that to be the best use of time because it could cut it really quick. I've had interviews and you still want to be mindful of everyone's time, and that's how I present it. I don't present it in the way that, hey, it's more my manager's. Well, it's also that the candidate's time, right? You want to make sure that the candidate's applying for a job that, they have bills, and I always present it in that way. I'm not saying you're not worth it. I'm not saying any of that stuff. You are accustomed to making a certain living, and you have bills that I don't know about. So therefore, I want to know what you're looking for. Let's not talk about bonuses. Let's not talk about anything. What do you need to take home to pay your bills? To come on site and to feel good about coming on site and to feel like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted. This is what is that number? Every candidate has a number. Now, understand in our industry, sometimes, and if you do come across a recruiter that does this, I'm sorry, do not hire these type of recruiters that will always talk down the salary at the tail end because they know that they can maybe shave off another $5,000 off the tail end. I've seen this happen in the industry. I am not a fan of that at all. My philosophy is you try to get what they want. And if you can't, then you have to be upfront about it. And I'm very upfront if someone's saying, hey, I make 130, I tell them the job pays 80. And if you want to move from Microsoft and go to a gaming company, that's what it means to come to it. And some people are okay with that. They just need to know. But for me, it's can you still afford to pay your bills at 80? Because I can't have a candidate come on board and not be happy or can't pay their bills because that affects everything else, right? So for some recruiters, it's a numbers thing. For me, it's not because I know, and I've been in the industry for a long time, that I'm affecting people's lives, how they support their families, and it's not, hey, how many fills did I get this month? When it becomes sometimes how many fills do you fill within that month, then it's just a numbers game, right? And that you have to think about if you're going to build a company, how do you keep those metrics? Are you rewarding your recruiters for how many fills? Are those quality fills? Because sometimes recruiters will just try to get the fill so that they can say they were successful. But where I'm at and how we do our recruiting, we have a target. And this target means I'm going to create stress on myself. I don't need anyone to create stress for me, right? But this target means I want to hit this number. But I don't have anyone telling me, oh gosh, you slipped this number. I already know this. Tell me the obvious doesn't help. I already know that what number I need to reach. But my goal is to hire quality candidates. Because then, in the end, hiring quality candidates builds your culture. You have happy candidates. They don't come on board saying, oh gosh, I wish I would have gotten this money. There's a lot to that. So that is just me going within the hiring process of how I tackle recruiting. And then, of course, the offer. You hope to make a certain offer. But I will never, ever, if at all I know I can't hire them at a certain point, at a certain number, it's usually done up front. So that when you do make the offer, you already know that this is what you're going to offer the person if they get the job. And it's usually pretty smooth from there. It's rare to have someone say they want more, unless the job changed on them, right? If what you're saying in your job description changes within the interview process, then candidates might say, whoa, I have more responsibility. So make sure that job description is pretty on point. So that's it for a little bit of the internal recruiter. Using agencies. We can turn it over a little bit to question and answers or any questions that you guys have. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We got to grab mics.
Oh, okay.
Whose hand was up here?
You mentioned culture. Culture can be a powerful recruiting tool. Culture can be a powerful interviewing process, or an add to the interviewing process. Can you speak to that a little bit and how to harness that and put it to the company's advantage for producing a quality candidate once they've come through the interview process.
Let me start.
You can start, and then
Okay.
I'll chime in mine.
So the word is often kind of overused and misunderstood. So when we talk about creating culture or meaningful culture, how do we create culture? First of all, every organization has a culture, right? It's not like we're going to go out and create one. There's already one in place, right? You can't, if you think about societal cultures, you can't be cultureless. So every organization has a culture. The trick is, as it pertains to recruitment, is how do we leverage that culture to help us recruit the right kind of people, right? And we don't want to, we want to be honest with our culture, right? If it's a culture that says these are, everyone that works here is going to work 12 to 15 hours a day, if that's our culture, then we want to make sure that that's communicated in the hiring process. We don't try and deceive or mislead applicants because there is an existing culture and we have to embrace that. However, we can be smart about a few things because, for example, sometimes people think, well, the big companies, the Googles or Amazons of the world, they have an advantage because they have a culture that everyone wants to go to, right? Everyone wants to go to work for Google because they have such a wonderful culture. Well, within your organizations, you have to think about how am I going to compete against that kind of culture, okay? Somehow this brand name culture that they have. Well, the first thing you have to do is recognize that not everyone wants to go work for giant companies. Many people out there want to work for smaller companies. Many people want to work for mission-driven organizations. Many people want to work for organizations that have good work-life balance. Many people want to work for organizations that have the latest and greatest technology. Many people want to go work for organizations that are doing interesting things. Many people out there want to go to work for organizations that are fun and engaging, right? We hear this word now, the engaged employee. So what you have to do is say, what's my culture? Then what aspects and what parts of that culture can I emphasize to attract the kind of people that fit in with that culture? But it's not about going out and creating a new culture. It's about what do you have in place now, and then how do you use that to attract the right kind of people? What I don't like is when I hear people say, well, no one wants to come work for my company because I don't have a name brand. I think there's lots of people out there that, just like if you think about, again, I always go back to analogies. You think about retail shopping, clothing, there's lots of very, very large clothing stores in town, right? We all know about Nordstrom and Macy's, right? Very large clothing stores. There's also a lot of wonderful boutiques. And many people shop at special boutique clothing stores. And those boutique clothing stores are offering customers something different than the big department stores. So that's the same analogy. I want you to think about yourself as the small boutique company, and what do you have to offer that's different than the giant department stores?
So I'll tag on that real quick. So we kind of brought this up earlier, and it was like question: how do you build culture if your company's 2 people, right? If your company's just starting up, how do you build that? And I was like, you know what? I usually, if I like the person that I'm interviewing with, like if I'm interviewing at a job and that hiring manager, I'm just like, we click. I really like this. Then that kind of feels like the culture, right? Because you're building something. You're the culture. You're going to start that culture. You're the one, and it's not what kind of benefits can I offer, because everyone says the same thing. Everyone says work-life balance, this, that. If they do say that, and if you say that you have work-life balance, then you got to pray that you don't have them working overtime all the time, if that makes sense. Because there are a lot of people, like you said, that will go in and they'll say one thing and they'll pitch, no, we have this, and if you have a career advancement, and we have free soft drinks and candy coming from the ceiling. You have all these things, but is that culture or is that just free stuff? Like Google, right? Google has, just their facilities are amazing, right? But they also hire a certain type of person, right? for ArenaNet, we hire a certain type of person because we have a certain type of culture. We have an open environment. Our layout is open. We have desks that are all over the place. They're movable, and it's collaborative. So we could interview the best gameplay programmer out there. But if they come across that they think they are, or they're not going to be as collaborative because it's their way, we won't hire them. We won't disrupt our culture for one person, right? And that's just the way it is. And so when you ask, like, how do you define culture? So, and I think it is based off of your employees and who you hire. And you're going to hire someone that you click with, that you get along with, that are like-minded. We hire programmers that think alike, not just, oh, you can do this, so great. No, we hire programmers that do stuff on the side, that program games on the side because they're passionate about it and this is what they love. They've been doing it since they were 10 years old, right? That's our culture. They're all like-minded people that enjoy the company of each other, right? If you can create that culture to where it doesn't feel like you're at work, then you've done your job, right? If you can, if you're, there's like a few companies out there that I've seen before that hire based on, I think it was like Enterprise Rent-A-Car hires people that are right out of college that have similar interests, right? Because they don't think that they're at work. They might be working a lot of hours, but they don't really worry about it because they're with their friends. So they're always doing stuff together. And I started out at companies that were like that. And you don't think that you're working a lot. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean work-life balance, right? That doesn't, like, you might want, like, you want to hire someone that's going to work hard for you, or understand that, yeah, there could be overtime. Are you okay to do that? But that's up front, right? But who you hire and the culture, I think, starts with, your leadership. That's just my answer to it. Go ahead.
Yeah, a quick question regarding interviewing, panel or group interviews versus the one-on-one. What are the pros and cons? Any hard feelings about that? I've had a former partner of mine who was very, very adamant about one versus the other.
You want me to dive in, or? Okay. We do both, and it all depends. I don't think so. What Jack talked about earlier was about having a structured interview. That's really, really important. Being well organized, going to an interview, knowing the candidate's background, and knowing what type of questions that you're going to ask. Right? There's nothing worse than just going in and let's see if we have a good feeling with this candidate and see if we hit it off. It's with my company, we'll have 2 people sitting in on an interview, and then we might have 1. And it necessarily doesn't mean one's better than the other. It's just that 2 people might be in the same type of group and they want to get a feeling for this candidate, right? But I'll tell you that big panel interviews can be intimidating, and sometimes big panel interviews, depending on who's in it, can be more so a contest of who has the most intelligent question, right? Oh, that was a great question. Check out this question. Wow, I just asked that question. Then it doesn't really become about the candidate. So you have to be really, really, you gotta know who's gonna be in that panel and make sure that they work and they have pertinent questions that they're gonna ask, right? Because again, we're driven by, one-upping each other. And sometimes interviews can get away from that and get off point. So having panel, I don't have like 7 people in an interview and it's one panel and it's really intimidating, but I will have 2 or 3 sometimes. And there might be whiteboards involved depending on what interview you're going for. But again, I don't think one is better than the other. You just have to figure out who is the people in the audience, right? I mean, who's the people in the panel? Does that make sense? You want to jump in on that, or?
No, I think you covered it. It's good. In the back here. Yes, sir.
A couple quick things. One is, you kind of make it sound like identifying talent and interviewing it in is kind of a linear process. It usually isn't. It's got all kinds of loops in it.
Uh-huh.
And also, one of the potential downsides in this whole process is sort of compliance stuff, which will get you in real deep trouble if you don't pay attention to it, like consistency and fairness and equity and all that. You want to speak to that and how that affects particularly smaller businesses where there aren't a lot of those human resource skills in getting the right people in?
Yeah, great question. So obviously from an HR perspective, I care a lot about those issues and certainly the compliance issues. So that's why a couple times we've talked about having a structured process, right? The recruiting, screening, and hiring process needs to be structured. If things are structured well, the chances of making compliance type mistakes go down, right? Because you're doing things in a more equitable, consistent manner. Certainly, anyone doing any actual interviewing needs to receive what we call interview skills training, because there are absolutely questions that you can and can't ask, and some of them aren't always obvious, right? And so managers who do interviewing without receiving training will ask, oh, I see that you're pregnant. When are you going to have your? Looks like you're wearing a lumberjack shirt. You must be a Republican, right? I mean, you start making comments like that are completely inappropriate for an interview. And sometimes managers think, well, it's just a way to break the ice or get to know somebody, and they inadvertently ask inappropriate questions. So everyone should receive interview skills training, and all interviews should be, the selection process should be highly structured and really be able to be scrutinized under a microscope if ever challenged, that the process was fair and equitable, and we followed the rules and laws. Absolutely. People that, the old expression, I went with my gut, that's the old interviewing, I interview and I go with my gut. If you hear people talk that way, I'm not saying to discount your gut, but if that's your only criteria for screening applicants, it's going to be a problem. Did I answer your question a little bit?
With one addition on the downside,
Please.
you suck up a lot of management time. You won't be able to run your business because you're busy fixing problems that got created in the hiring process.
Through a poor selection process, you mean? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, hiring bad employees, that's a whole kind of another seminar, but obviously consequences can be quite significant. And it's not just compliance, it's just lost opportunity alone can be significant.
No, that was great.
Question over here? It's important that we make them go from this end to this end.
Next one will be
Like
over
a
here.
tennis match. So, from the perspective of the employee who comes into these interviews,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I can hear me. Okay. So, from the perspective of the employee who comes into these interviews, we never know why the employer picked the particular items in their job description. There's rarely there's a sort of a ritual you go through in an interview, and it's not very transparent from the employee side. Why did you want this credential? Why did you want 3 years of experience or 10 with that? Okay. So what have you seen companies do in the screening and or the hiring phase, I guess, where they explain what the point was of their particular hiring criteria?
Want to take that?
Yeah. So, internal recruiter. So, we'll get those managers that go, they have to have this degree, they have to graduate from these type of colleges, they have to have this many years of experience. And so we do ask those questions up front. Why? Because
those are what I'd characterize as negative screening criteria.
Right.
Okay. So how do you get to the more positive screening?
So the thing is that each manager will have their own, like, I graduated from this school, so I want to hire people that are this, right? You have to break them from, having an internal recruiter like me, I have the relationship with the manager. My job is to make sure that they're hiring the right candidates and that we're not weeding out great candidates because of this one factor? Why does it necessarily need to be this degree? And fortunate for me at our company, we don't have there might be a few managers that ask for certain types of, like, I need X amount of experience, and that might come with the mere fact that, hey, we need this experience because without it, that means that they can't do this job, and this is the reasons why, right? We go into details with the managers on, like, why, because we have to pre-screen these, right? We have to talk to these candidates and see if they fit the job. If they don't, then I'm wasting my manager's time. But I'm not a fan of the whole, and that's my experience of the whole screen out type of deals, because I think there's a lot of talent out there, and if you if you have these type of managers that are just going, no, I need this, this, and this, or they're not qualified, then you're missing out on some great talent. And sometimes it comes to, like, just having different, like, coaching these managers, which is tough, right? Majority of the time it's really tough, but it's coaching these managers on, here's a good example. We hired this person. You like working with this person, right? Yeah, this person's great. Well, that person didn't graduate from XYZ, or that person doesn't have X experience. It's showing examples, but sometimes in startups and stuff, that's hard to do, right?
Yeah. Have you ever had a case where an external recruiter had a process where they could expand the hiring criteria?
Yeah. So here's the thing. For external recruiters, majority of the time, external recruiters will come back and say, listen, I've been working on this for like a week now. And the reason why you haven't seen any resumes is because X, Y, Z. You're looking for someone that has this degree, that has this background, that just doesn't exist in the market. But this does. Can I show you some of these resumes that doesn't have this piece in it? Maybe they don't have this degree from this school, but look at this background, right? They'll do that all the time.
Okay, so it's recruiter based. Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
You said you had LinkedIn Recruiter, and
Yeah.
or maybe that was you.
Yeah, it was LinkedIn.
That's a real
Recruiter.
thing. Yeah.
So I was curious about the analytics and things. I mean, from the little you said about what's available to you, I just got the impression you have a bigger pool of people. But are the actual reports that you see significantly different? Can you learn something different that I can't see myself with a smaller group of people?
You mean from LinkedIn?
Yeah.
So if you have the recruiter version of LinkedIn, you're able to go out there and do searches of anyone who has a LinkedIn account. You can actually source in that database. Right now, you can't do that. You can't say, I want to find all of the geologists, west of Chicago. You don't have that ability in LinkedIn. If you buy the recruiter version, essentially you can, and you can get the contact information and then contact those people.
Right.
That's what the recruiter version allows you to.
So to rephrase, you can do kind of like SQL queries or whatever, and just
Sure.
get whatever they've got in their database.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. So, and I want to add just one small piece. And remember, I'm an HR person, not really a recruiter. Right now, I have 6 recruiters that work for me. So we're filling lots of jobs. We fill probably 75 or so jobs a month. Now, these are not all high-end tech positions. Some of them are warehouse manager positions, right? But we have a lot of applicant flow. Remember, we were talking about applicant flow earlier. So if you think about what an HR person does, right? You mentioned negative screening a minute ago. Okay, that is a real issue, and I want to explain it for a second. So if there's anyone in this room who's looking for a job, I think you'll appreciate this. In some ways, fair, not fair, like it or not, the recruiter's job is to look, not necessarily, when they start, not necessarily look for the best person. It's how do I take this stack, the proverbial stack of 300 resumes, and get it down to like 15 or 20 that I can actually spend some time with and find the best candidate. So entry-level type positions, recruiters that operate in that arena, if you will, they look for ways to screen people out, not screen people in, because they don't have enough time to to actually look at every single applicant and decide what's the best fit, what are they trying to tell me, what do they want to do. It doesn't work that way. They can't. They have to take that giant applicant pool and screen it down. So what that means is they will look for, the truth hurts sometimes, I know, they will look for any reason to put the person in the no pile.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just give you some examples here. Give me one typo on a cover letter, out. Okay, use the wrong job title in your application, out.
Yeah.
Right? Say, if I am looking for certain criteria, years of experience, degrees, or whatever, if I don't see that or see a really good explanation of why it's not on there and it's really apparent to me, it's in the no pile. They have to do it. Logistically, there is no way they can go through and look at the third page of the resume and dig down and actually determine that, well, they don't have a master's degree, but they have a bachelor's degree with some extra. Nobody's going to spend that much time with their resume. So if you see an advertisement for a job, or you see a job description and there's specific criteria on there, you may or may not agree with what the manager decided the criteria is, but your application has to either align very closely with that criteria, or you have to explain it somehow very clearly. Otherwise, your resume is going to go in the no pile. There's no other way for the recruiter to do it.
So are you looking at examples of work samples that say websites or prototypes or things to understand what someone's resume means?
In terms if they submit a...
Or is it just a keyword match?
Okay, so obviously it's going to be position dependent. Okay, applicant tracking software, right? So Thomas mentioned applicant tracking software. So big companies, I mean, even us, and use applicant tracking software too. Applicant tracking software oftentimes has the ability to electronically screen resumes for keywords, right? So if I'm looking for a person that has certain qualifications, I can have the software do that screening for me. So basically what's happening there, again, like it or not, your resume is being put into the no pile because of the software. The recruiter, in some cases, might not even see your resume because you don't have the degree that I'm looking for. And again, sometimes, I mean, you can imagine how many resumes Google gets, right? They have to have some kind of high-level screen, and I'm guessing they use applicant tracking software to do that, and it filters down, and then eventually a human being actually looks at the resume. But if I'm understanding your question, this applicant tracking software very definitely can screen for keywords and keep a resume out off a recruiter's desk. Is that kind of what you were asking me? No? Okay, sorry.
I'll try.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I know.
okay.
So you're saying like, are we looking at their links to their websites and stuff to see if they, yes, depending on the role, right? If the role requires that they have a portfolio, then yes, for sure, we do look at that. But that's certain companies. Certain companies, like I said, the applicant tracking system, you might not even get that resume because if your manager is going, I need them to have a degree, and they don't, that resume doesn't make it to me.
Okay.
Right.
So first they have to meet the
There's
bullets in
there's
the
minimum
ad,
criteria.
and then only then does the company look at the work sample.
Exactly. And there's things that like cover letters, right?
Yeah.
How many people spend a lot of time on cover letters? How many recruiters have time to read cover letters? I don't. Do we go back to the cover letters? Yes, but that's just me. We go through keywords pretty quick, and then if the keywords aren't there, then we move on.
So how do you
And-
find a creative in a gaming company?
Right?
Okay.
How do we find...
A collaborative creative? That's what you said the culture is.
Right.
How do you find it? I mean, because I wouldn't think that the bullets or keywords and resumes would really.
Oh, there are. The keywords. So it depends on the role. We could have a concept artist. So if we have a concept artist, we have character artists, we have environment artists. These are all artists that work on different parts in our game. They all have titles. They all have positions that they worked on in the past. They have a lot of the key words are in the titles, right? Recruiters, when we do stuff like on LinkedIn, we put in keyword searches. Some call it Boolean searches, but we do a keyword search. If you don't have those keywords in your resume, it's not pulling up. But when going back to your LinkedIn question too, LinkedIn Recruiter has it so you have a view of not only every candidate on or every LinkedIn member, you also can filter it by industry. Oh, you wanted, I want to find someone that's actually working in the gaming industry. Click a button over here. Pulls up everyone in the gaming industry. All right, now I need the gaming industry in Seattle. Click it over here. Shows me everyone in Seattle. Now I'm, I have a choice of sending them we call it in-mail. They're not my friend on LinkedIn, but I can actually send a message into them directly. And so those are all different ways. And again, it's a very, very powerful tool. And it didn't used to be used a while back, but now it's like one of the only tools, out there that you can reach out to a lot of people with. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Other questions?
I've got one.
Okay, one person right over there.
What are some of your favorite red flags to help you quickly put a person as you're looking in the resume, or maybe you're in the phone screen now, to quickly, in your mind, you've done this so many times, you know that that's a red flag, and to save everybody else time?
All right. Red flag is money. One of the key things that I look for is to see, is this candidate in it for the money or the actual role? So my job is to see, are they, to tie in when I ask like what they're looking for, right? And so that's a red flag if they're really bent on that money. Another is title. If they start harping on, is this a senior position and will I be called a senior this, then that's another red flag, because if it's not, this person's after a title, right? And other red flags that, and sometimes, looking through resumes, and it's hard to decipher, you have to figure out, sometimes they look like they're job hopping, when really they've just been in unfortunate jobs, if that makes sense. And you have to find out why. In our world, a lot of studios shut down, but and that's why some people are no longer working there. So it's finding out those things. But in another part, it's were they truly job hopping, and that's a red flag in the sense that, are you going to have someone that's going to be with your company for the long term? Why are they leaving? And you're always finding out. You have to ask, why are you leaving? Now, if it's because of career progression and they've reached that, okay, understand. But do you have that career progression at your job, at your opening? So you gotta really, really pinpoint, why are they leaving? Why my company? Why? And so there are many red flags. One is money, one's titles, another is just to make sure that they're not job hopping, right? You want to jump on?
We call it, we have a term in our office, we call it resume spamming, right? Where people will just submit their resume knowing that they're not qualified, or they don't really understand the position, or they haven't applied correctly, or again, the job title is wrong, or, you can just kind of tell that they're sending us spam, right? And so when you see that, you obviously put those are big red flags. And people that just go online and submit their resume all over town on different, in different ways, or to different companies, those that you're wasting your time, because usually the recruiter can tell that it's resume spam, and again, it goes in the no pile.
Yeah, and jumping on that, he's right in the sense that I usually jump in and ask, how did you hear about our company? And that'll tell a lot. Mm-hmm. If they're like, oh, well, I'm a big fan of your game and this, and they've done, even if they hadn't heard of your game or your company before, at least they've done the research and they're interested about it, right? Not like, oh, well, I don't really, if you get anyone that goes, I really don't, know much about you, tell me a little bit about you. That's your one shot, right? So that's...
So no resume spamming.
Yeah.
And one follow-up to that is, so now let's say you get to the interview process. There weren't any glaring red flags, and now you really want to make sure that you're not sold yourself. So I feel that I'm getting better at interviewing, but I'm learning along the way, and it's been a costly experience in allowing people to sell me. And really, I want to know, what are your best practices of being able to, you talked about the behavioral interview questions. What are those best practices of being able to drill in on the candidate as they're sitting there in that interview process, so that you put them in the hot seat, you get them sweating for a little bit, and you're asking them very hard questions, kind of understanding where the break point is, so that you're not the one being sold on the position.
So,
I mean,
yeah,
let's. You got 2 or 3 questions wrapped into that one. So, first of all, somebody asked me earlier before we started about those really difficult hot seat interviews, right? You know, and that should tell you, if you're an applicant and you're in one of those interviews, that's going to tell you something about that organization, right? And we hear horror stories sometimes about organizations that have these really difficult, stressful, hot seat type interviews. Now, if you're applying for a job where you need to be able to handle that level of stress and anxiety and pressure, then I suppose that interview style would be appropriate, right? Because it does relate to the job. But oftentimes it doesn't. And the connection between putting you in a hot seat interview and actually the job requirements are non-existent, I probably wouldn't want to work for a company like that, because it's not respectful, it's not appropriate, and I don't think actually adds anything to the process. I know that's not exactly your question, but I just wanted to add that you should steer clear of those companies, honestly.
I agree 100%. I'm not a fan of companies that do that. There are ways, so I look at it as that there are ways to do that, but without making someone feel like they're in the hot seat. Because at the end of the day, you're not trying to, oh, I stumped you, right? That's not the type of person. And if you have someone doing those type of interviews, don't have that person doing those type of interviews. Yank that person out fast, because that's the candidate experience. At the end of the day, I've interviewed at places and had a head of HR say, you work for so-and-so. If I talk to her, what would she say about you? And blah, blah, blah. And I didn't like the interview. There was no way I was going to work for that company, because I didn't get a good feeling for the company. So there are ways. So our programmers, they do a test. They do a big test. It takes about 4 hours to do this programming test. After that test, all of our team receives that test, and then they ask questions about why the candidate chose to do this type of programming. Why did you choose to do this and that? But they ask in a way that's more fact-finding, but not like, oh, why did you do that? That was dumb. Why would you, right? Not at all. That's not our culture, right? And we talk about how do you build that culture. Well, your culture is in the interview process too. You got to try to sell this candidate on why they want to work for you. And not just because you have some big name that they're going to work for you. And I've seen candidates go through interviews that have been behavioral type. Don't get me wrong, behavioral type of interview questions are good to a point. You want the behavioral interview questions to actually be fact-finding for you, so that you can understand, all right, what type of situations were they in before, and how did they accomplish that, right? And you dive deeper and deeper and deeper. It's just not yes or no question, right? And so having interviews like that, I agree with Jack. I would not want any of my, and I get what, go ahead. You were
Yeah,
gonna say.
so just to clarify as well, so I'm thinking in my mind actually of programming roles.
Right.
And you can't just ask high-level basic questions when you're trying to find someone who can code.
Right.
That person has to know what they're doing.
Right.
So you need to get to the point where you're at least going through some challenging questions,
Right.
to really see what they're capable of doing, versus just asking them some
But there's
comfortable questions that are easy to answer.
But-
Because
but-
then at the end of the day, you didn't really understand if this person could get the job done and deliver.
But there's a way of doing that, right? And it's all in the approach. Without them, it's not about creating the environment to where you ask a question and you're just silent and you want to see them panic and see if they can answer it in a panic mode, because you're not really going to get, this could be an incredible programmer that you're missing out on because they're not good at public speaking or they're not good at that type of environment. But you throw them in a corner and you ask them to code, and they are just the most amazing programmers that you ever, but you missed out because you're looking for the wrong thing in those type of interviews, right? Our programmers, our main thing is to, can we guide them to the solution? And if we can't, we can't. And then we have a debrief about it, right? So not only do you interview, we have a debrief at the very end to figure out what is everyone's experience, and did you, when you asked them this question, were they able to answer that solution? And as a group, we decide whether or not we move forward or not. If the candidate has potential and they think, they don't have to ace the interview to get the job with us. They just have to have the potential, right? And you'll be surprised if you hire some people that have that potential. I always love hiring people that are gracious and are appreciative of getting hired, right? Not that people that think that they should get hired, just like they're really excited to work for your company, right? And that goes along with who's interviewing these candidates. Are they excited that, yeah, I had this great interview and they're really nice and they asked some great questions and we're all like-minded and I had a great, but not the, oh gosh, they had some, it's okay to have tough questions, but it's also okay to help try to lead them to see if they're just stumped for a second, right? Because again, we're talking about speed dating, right? It's speed dating. And that one instant, they could just get stumped, but be a really good programmer. So it's our job to try to guide them. And if we can't guide them, then you start figuring out, all right, they really don't know what they should know, right? If that helps.
Thanks.
Huh?
I think one more question.
I wanted to ask Jack, could you quickly summarize some of the no-no compliance questions?
Oh, for interviewing?
Yeah, just, I have a rough idea.
Right. So there's kind of a long list of questions you can and can't ask, but I think you want to avoid questions that give you information about a candidate that is protected under civil rights laws. For example, you don't ask questions about national origin. You don't ask questions about someone's religion. You don't ask questions about someone's politics. You don't ask questions about whether you don't ask questions about gender-based identity. You don't ask questions about someone's physical or mental health, because those are protected classes. You have to avoid, obviously you wouldn't ask direct or indirect questions about that, right? So you could inadvertently ask a question about someone's national origin by saying, oh, your last name is Bergen. Are you German, right? So that's maybe a nice way for us to get acquainted and get to know one another, and probably appropriate for maybe a cocktail party conversation, but inappropriate for a job interview. I gave the pregnancy example earlier. You would never ask someone, oh, it looks like you're pregnant. Are you planning to come back to work after you have the baby? Those are totally inappropriate type questions.
Age.
Age, of course, yes. Age is, marital status, inappropriate question. Sometimes recruiters get around some of those by, asking questions like, when did you graduate from high school, right? There's some, things like that. So you got to, some people try and kind of weasel their way around some of those questions, but in general, age-related questions are inappropriate.
Yeah, which I don't know why I'd ask anyone that, right? So, but
Yeah.
people, where what happens is that when you're trying to create conversation is where the risk is. If you stick with the job description and what the questions about the job and their history, then you'll be okay. It's when you start trying to have the conversation and to cut the ice and like, hey, you traveled here. Do you have family? Did you move? You can't ask those things.
You gotta be careful.
And you got to be really careful about the conversations, right?
Sometimes the applicants will inadvertently start talking about something inappropriate themselves, right? And then the interviewer's like, I don't want to know about your health situation. And it's important that the person doing the interview then changes that topic and stops that conversation, because you don't need to know about the person's diabetic situation or battle with cancer last year. Totally inappropriate for an interview.
Right, and it also goes for your employees too, right? Employees can't come up, and I've had this in my career, to say, hey, I really would like someone, a young woman to come for this position. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. It's like I was like, why would you say that to me, right? And, they might have their reasons, but that's just a big no-no, right?
There are a few things that seem inappropriate that are actually okay. And I'm not necessarily advocating you do this, but just because we're talking about the things you can't ask, you can, for example, ask if you're a smoker. And there's nothing, you could have a policy in your organization that says we don't hire smokers. And that seems kind of strange, right? Seems kind of contrary to what we might think, but there are no protection for people. Sounds like our mic's going out here. There are no protections for people who smoke. So sometimes there's...
Excuse me, I think, Jack, this one is still
live?
still live.
This one's, this okay now? David, I think we're okay. Yep. Yes, sir.
What's your point? If it relates to the job, you can ask it. If it doesn't relate to the job, you can't.
Well, that's true, except sometimes the manager thinks that the fact that you're pregnant relates to the job, because
That's a thought. That's not.
you're right, but sometimes people say only, they'll conjure up, you're only, 5'4", and the warehouse is a hard, tough place to work, and you're not going to be able to do this job. They think that's relevant to the job. Of course, it's not. So that's the training that the managers need to have, so they understand what is appropriate and how do I determine what's appropriate. Yeah, good point. Other questions?
Well, I'd like to thank Jack and Thomas, and I would imagine if there are any other questions, they might be willing to hang around for a minute or two and entertain them. Small audience, but I think, some really good questions.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate you guys for having us.
I'm glad that we captured them, and I hope that the audience found the program to be of value. And Brian, thank you for coming up with the idea and helping to get things going.
Great. Thanks for having me.